Right. Activity-based costing. I think it's really important to understand what's happening here. With traditional absorption costing, what we always did, we would say, for example, listen, we have an overhead of 50,000. This A, we have B, and we would say you had 4,000 hours and you had 1,000 hours. And so we traditionally shared costs based on volume. We argued that the more volume you had of something, you should take more of the cost. And that was the driver, right? But that was because we assumed a natural connection between volume and cost. That's the key point. The problem here is, what if you have a really high cost that's not driven by volume per se, as in volume of hours or the traditional volume as we know it, volume of machine hours, or because you could have 4,000 hours, you could have 10,000 hours, sorry, 10,000 machine hours, same thing here, but this 50,000 is not caused by that. It could be caused by a completely different type of overhead. You could still have hours, but it's just not driven by hours, which means you will end up sharing this differently. For example, this 50,000, maybe most of it, maybe 40,000 of it could be driven by quality inspections. And maybe B actually has, if you like, 9 of those quality inspections, and A only has 1 of those quality inspections. But because you haven't cut good records of these inspections, you keep assuming they're driven by hours. So once we now know this, we now think, oh, right, it's not actually driven by hours, it's driven by another sort of broken down cost driver. And that's what activity-based costing is really telling us, that if we can find what's actually causing the cost, we can now split the overhead based on those causes. Right. So let us now come over here and look at this, look at these objective questions, which are helpful in understanding what's taking place. So the first one says that a cost driver is any factor that causes a change in the cost of an activity. Well, yes, a driver causes that. So like those quality inspections, the more quality inspections you have, the greater the cost. For long-term variable overhead costs, the cost driver could be the volume of activity. So I am saying, yes, that it is very possible that hours and machine hours, labor hours could be the cause of an overhead. Of course they can. Of course they can. And if you're looking at these variable overhead costs, that's the case. And generally, traditional absorption costing will underallocate overhead costs to low volume products. Yes, because we are saying that the smaller the volume, the less of the overhead. But that might not be the case. The argument might be that this overhead itself is not driven by volume of products. It might be driven by other overheads. You could be making, look, you could be making 10 units of something. Here you're making 90 units, right? And you have an overhead of 10,000. This way you would give less here. But what if I told you this this cost was based on overhead and quality inspections, and this business had actually had 9 quality inspections, and this has had 1 quality inspection, even though there are only 10 units. Think of this as a really important drug. We're only making 10 of it, but we need 9 inspections, and that's what's caused this. So in the end, this 10,000, 9,000 of this overhead should go here, and only 1,000 here. You could say, but I'm only making 10 units. Well, then it's an expensive drug. That doesn't change the fact that they should take more of the cost. So we then get the pricing right, right? So in this question, all of these are true. When we look at question 39, which is really an extension, a repeat of question 1, it says the following statements have been made in relation to ABC. A cost driver is something that causes a change, correct? And traditional absorption costing tends to underestimate overheads for high. No, it's for low volume products. It gives less. It gives the tendencies to give overheads. Well, or if you want, it doesn't matter how you want to say it. For high volume products, it gives more of the overheads as opposed to underestimate. It's more about overestimate. So we tend to split it that way. So key point here is that traditional will give lower to lower volume, higher cost to higher volume. And so the answer here is one only, as in only the first answer is correct. I have done this question 40. We're on to question 40. I have done this question in class. I think it's a good question to repeat for yourself. Imagine this is whenever you see this kind of purchase orders setups, you have more information. So you're thinking, ABC. But before ABC, we just used to have this sort of scenario, right? We just had, here are the overheads, 420,000. Here are the overheads, 420,000. So because these are the overheads, 420,000, what we then say is, well, what do we know about this business? We know that typically this is these overheads, traditional absorption costing is split based on labor hours, and that's how we would go about trying to split this, if you like. So let's look at the first question. Using a traditional, what would be the overhead for a cost of unit for alpha? So what we would say is, we'll say, listen, let's get all the total hours. Of course, yes, that's what we've been doing so far. So we're saying we would ignore this for now. We would just focus on this section over here, where we know we can find the total hours involved. So we can say, well, alpha currently has when I say alpha, I mean, think of it like this. You have 1,200, 10,000. I mean, I'm just laying it out differently. 5. Let's find the total number of hours first, right? So causing this total cost, so we can find the overhead absorption rate. Yes. So 5 times 12 is 60. That's 2 zeros again. 10,800 times 5. 10,800. 10,800 times 5 is 54,000. So we have 54,000 here. And so we have a total of 60,000 hours causing this overhead. And so we can argue the overhead absorption rate must be 420,000 divided by 60,000. So we now know what the overhead absorption rate is per hour, and that's £7, isn't it? That's £7. So I know what the overhead, but I mean, so now it tells me that I need 5 hours to make a unit of alpha. I need 5 hours to make a unit of beta. Well, that's pretty straight. What is the overhead cost per unit of alpha? Or did I get that right? Yes, for alpha, direct labor hours per unit is 5. Yes, of course. 7 times 5. Thank you. And that's 35. Yes, 35. And so my answer here is C. Yes. The same thing would apply for beta, because it's the same thing. It's 5 hours as well. It's 5 hours as well. I need 5 hours to make that. So that's 7 times 5, and that's 35, right? Let's look at, although now, so now when it comes to talk about activity-based costing, I will simply ignore this. Well, let's see to what extent, and look at what additional information I have about drivers. I actually can break down that overhead cost and tell you but I have to do it when I say I have to do it, you'll see what I mean by, I'm telling you that that I can tell you, I can split this cost between alpha and beta based on their usages. So let's look at setups. If you look at setups over here, it says that there are 100 setups in total. So I can find what the overhead is per setup. That's 180,000 divided by 100. Yes, so that's 1,800 a setup. Yes, 1,800 a setup. In total, alpha had 40 setups. So alpha had 40 times 1,800, and beta had 60 times 1,800. That's how we would share that cost. It must be, right? So I'm just going to do these in separate places. I think you should be fine with my disorganization on the page by now. 72,000, and then beta 60 times 1,800 is 108,000. Okay, great. So we have that. That's the setup. Let's look at purchasing. Looking at purchasing, you have 150,000. Here are the purchase orders. So you have a total of 150,000, and you have 150 purchase orders in total. So it means that you must have had £1,000 per order. Now alpha had 70 of those, so that's all nice. I'm going to write alpha here. Alpha 70 times 1,000, 70,000. And beta had 80 of those, and that's 80,000 for beta. So you can see I will use different colors to circle out the different. And then finally, I have labor. And again, I just need to find out what the. I think we did that earlier on, didn't we? We found out that the total number of hours was 60,000 hours, didn't we? Right, in total, because we said. Oh, did we? No. Let's just find that again. Yes, 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 it was. It was 60,000 because this was 54,000. This was 6,000, wasn't it? So we had a total of 60,000 hours. So I can find what as far as labor is concerned, I can find what the overhead absorption rate is, which would be 90,000 over 60,000. Yes, which is 90,000 divided by 60,000, which is 1.5. So that's 1.5 per hour, right? So what I suppose the best thing to do is then to multiply that 1.5 by the total number of hours. So 1.5. So for alpha, that's 1.5 times 5 times 1,200, which is 1.5 times 6,000. So 1.5 times 6,000 is 9,000. So 9,000 of this cost, alpha, 9,000 of this cost, 9,000 of this cost goes to alpha, and the difference, of course, beta will be 81,000. So I found them as totals, right? Hopefully, as you're doing this, you can see. So just using a different pen color, I'm just going to circle all the alphas. These are the alphas here. In total, I've now split alpha's costs, and I'll use a red pen for beta's costs based on their different drivers. So now, this is over all the units. Now I can find whatever they want from me. The question that says, go ahead, Oyen, and what does it want? It says, what is the overhead absorption for each unit of a product of beta? So with beta, I will simply bring together all of betas. That's 108,000 plus 81,000 plus 80,000, and divide that. Let me find this first. 108,000 plus 81,000 plus 80,000. That's 269,000, and I will divide that by the total number of units of beta, which is 10,800, because that's what it's asking me. What is the overhead per 10,800? 269 divided by 10,800, and that comes out of 24.9. Let's see if that's there. Yes, that's there. 24.9. Yes, 24.9. And then it was the same thing. Oh, sorry, that's for. Sorry, that 24.9 was for beta. For alpha, it would have been just doing the other one, which was 72,000 plus 9,000 plus 70,000. Let's add all that together. 72,000 plus 9,000 plus 70,000. That's 151,000, and divide that 151,000 by the number of units, which is 1,200. Divide that by 1,200, and you get £125.83. So £125.83. Right? And that's how you deal with that. Yeah, it does need a bit of time, but I think the key message is that when you're talking about absorption costing, we don't know about these breakdowns. It's just more evolutionary, isn't it? We had traditional absorption before we had ABC. So with traditional absorption, we're just looking at the total of this 420 and splitting it based on a slightly archaic form, assuming labor is what's causing it. But if we now break it down, we can now try and deal with these individually and then add them all back up together. Okay, great stuff. And that's question 40. I think that was a bit of a long one, so I think we'll end that one and then start the next question in the next video.